She has spent years invisible, the Omega no one ever looked at twice. So when the Lykan King Cipher marks her as his mate during the Blood Moon ceremony, Laura knows something has gone catastrophically wrong. But the bond is already seared into her neck before she can protest. Suddenly, the virgin who was surviving on the margins of her pack is waking up in the king's bed, his massive body wrapped around hers, with no memory of how she consented to any of this. Except Laura isn't the only one in the palace. 9 elite Omegas have been summoned to the royal court for the king's consideration. Not because he wants a political alliance, but because he needs a true mate. An Omega capable of surviving the royal trials and bearing the next heir. Now, Laura isn't just trying to escape an unwanted bond. She's competing to keep it. She must prove herself worthy enough to stay in his bed, close enough to understand why her body betrays her every time he's near. Unfortunately, every moment in his presence feels electric, consuming, as if they're both fighting a hunger neither can fully control. And the longer Laura remains at his side, the harder it becomes to resist the pull of this king who should terrify her. She tells herself it's just the mating bond, biology, ancient magic, anything but the truth. Because if this connection isn't just fate's mistake, then it might be fate's design. And that would change everything. Please, if you're listening to this story, help me reach my goal of 1,500 subscribers by the end of this week. Hit that subscribe button and enjoy the story. Laura's eyes snapped open to silk. Rich, midnight blue silk that cost more than her entire pack's monthly food stores. The scent hit her next, sandalwood and smoke and something wild that made her Omega instincts purr even as her rational mind screamed danger. Then she felt the weight. A muscular arm banded across her waist, heavy as iron, possessive as a claim. The bare chest pressed against her back radiated heat that seemed to seep into her bones. Each breath she took drew in more of that intoxicating scent, and her body responded in ways that terrified her, softening, yielding, wanting. Laura's hand flew to her neck. Her fingers found raised skin, still tender, shaped like teeth. The mating mark. Oh gods. Oh gods, no. Memories crashed through her fragmented consciousness. The blood moon ceremony. The ancient stones glowing silver. She'd only attended because her pack alpha had insisted every unmated Omega show respect to tradition. She remembered standing in the back, invisible as always, watching the ritual she'd never believed would touch her life. Then their eyes had met across the ceremonial circle. Lykan King Cipher. 32 years old. Powerful enough to crush her pack with a thought. His gaze had locked onto hers with the force of a physical blow, and something inside her had answered. Something primal and terrifying and completely beyond her control. The rest was a blur of silver light and unbearable heat, and his voice, deep, commanding, inevitable, saying words she couldn't quite remember but felt branded into her soul. You're awake. The rumble of his voice against her back made her entire body clench. Not with fear. With something far more dangerous. Laura tried to pull away. The arm around her waist tightened. Don't. One word, but it carried the weight of an alpha command that made her Omega nature freeze in place. The bond is too new. Moving apart will hurt. Hurt. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. You marked me. I don't even know what happened. Neither do I. The admission sounded like it cost him something. In 300 years, I've never felt anything like what happened when our eyes met. 300 years. Right. Because the Lykan King was practically immortal, and she was 27-year-old nobody who'd never even been kissed before last night. If she had been kissed. She didn't remember. Didn't remember consenting to any of this. I need to go home. She hated how her voice shook. This is a mistake. There must be a way to break it. His chest expanded with a sharp breath. Is that what you want? The question felt loaded. Laura opened her mouth to say yes, of course yes, but her body betrayed her. Even now, wrapped in his arms, some traitorous part of her felt safe. Complete. Like she'd been missing this her entire life without knowing it. "It doesn't matter what I want," she whispered. I can't be your mate. I'm nothing. You're mine." His hand splayed across her stomach, and heat flooded through her. "The bond doesn't lie. But you're right about one thing." He pulled away, and the sudden absence felt like losing a limb. Laura bit back a whimper. Cipher stood, and Laura's breath caught. He was shirtless, all carved muscle and predatory grace, dark hair falling to his shoulders. When he looked at her, his eyes glowed with an inner fire that made her heart race. "The court will demand proof of your worthiness," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Royal law requires it. You'll face the trials." Trials. Panic clawed at her throat. "If you survive them, no one can question your right to stand at my side." He extended his hand. "But first, they need to see you. We present ourselves in 1 hour." Laura stared at his hand like it was a venomous snake. Taking it meant accepting this nightmare. Refusing it meant, what? She could already feel the bond pulling at her, demanding she close the distance between them. She took his hand. The throne room fell silent as Laura entered at Cipher's side. She'd been dressed in royal blue, the same shade as the sheets she'd woken up in, a clear declaration of who had claimed her. The gown was more expensive than anything she'd ever touched, but it felt like a costume on her common frame. 9 women stood in a line before the throne. Beautiful, poised, dripping with confidence and noble breeding. Their eyes tracked Laura's approach with varying degrees of shock and fury. Elite Omegas. The kind who were raised from birth to compete for positions like this. Laura's steps faltered. Cipher's hand tightened on hers. "Steady," he murmured, too low for others to hear. "Show no weakness. They'll use it against you." The assembled nobles whispered behind jeweled fans. Laura caught fragments, "Lowborn, mistake, won't last a week." Cipher led her to the center of the room. Released her hand. Stepped back. Then he turned to face his court, and his voice rang with absolute authority. "Last night, the blood moon chose. I present to you Laura, bearer of my mark. My mate." The shock rippled through the crowd like a wave. One of the 9 Omegas, a striking woman with midnight hair, laughed. Actually laughed. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's nobody. A low-ranking Omega from a failing pack. She doesn't even know how to stand in the presence of nobility." Laura's face burned, but she forced herself not to look away. Cipher's expression didn't change. The bond doesn't care about bloodlines. But the law does care about worthiness. His gaze swept the 9 women, then returned to Laura. "She will compete in the royal trials alongside those of you who remain as candidates. 10 Omegas. 9 trials. Only one will prove herself capable of being my queen." "This is outrageous." A male voice from the crowd. "The trials are for selecting a mate, not validating one already chosen." "The bond is formed," Cipher said coldly. "But until she passes the trials, it remains incomplete." His pause was deliberate, and Laura felt her face flame as she understood the implication. Royal law is clear. All potential queens must prove their worth. One of the nobles stepped forward, an older woman dripping in emeralds. "And if she fails, my lord? What becomes of an incomplete bond?" Cipher's jaw tightened. "Then I will be free to choose from those who succeed." The words hit Laura like a physical blow. She could fail. She could lose this bond that terrified and compelled her in equal measure. And based on the predatory smiles spreading across the faces of the other 9 Omegas, they intended to make sure that's exactly what happened. Laura lifted her chin, meeting the midnight-haired Omega's triumphant gaze. "Let them try." The trial chamber was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings soared 3 stories high, covered in murals depicting past queens, all beautiful, all powerful, all nothing like Laura. 10 ornate chairs formed a semicircle facing a panel of stone-faced noble judges. Cipher sat apart on an elevated throne, his expression carefully blank. Laura took her assigned seat between a willowy blonde who refused to acknowledge her existence and the midnight-haired Omega from yesterday, who kept glancing at the mark on Laura's neck with barely concealed rage. "I'm Seraphine," the dark-haired woman said, her smile sharp as a blade. "I suppose we should introduce ourselves, since we'll be competing. Though some of us have been preparing our entire lives for this honor, while others—" Her gaze raked over Laura's simple dress. "Well, stumbled into it by accident." "The bond chose," Laura said quietly, hating how defensive she sounded. "The bond is incomplete." Seraphine leaned closer. "Which means it can still be broken. And trust me, darling, you're going to break long before the rest of us." The head judge, a severe woman named Lady Morven, rose. "The first trial tests knowledge essential to any queen: royal protocol, noble lineages, alliance structures, and diplomatic history. You will answer questions in turn. 3 failures, and you are eliminated." Laura's stomach dropped. She knew nothing about royal protocol. Her pack barely had enough resources to survive, let alone study the intricacies of noble society. The questioning began. The other Omegas answered with practiced ease, reciting complex genealogies and obscure historical treaties. When Laura's first turn came, sweat dampened her palms. "Lady Laura," Lady Morven said, the title dripping with skepticism. "Name the 3 ancient pacts that formed the original Lykan Council, and explain the significance of their territorial markers." Laura's mind went blank. She felt Cipher's gaze on her like a physical touch, and the bond flared with something: concern? Encouragement? The intensity of it made her breath catch. Then she remembered. A story her grandmother used to tell. "Nightshade, Silvercrest, and Thornwood," she said slowly. Their territorial markers weren't just boundaries. They were sacred sites where the first alphas pledged to protect all wolves, not just their own bloodlines. The markers still stand because breaking that oath would curse the entire realm, Lady Morven finished, surprise flickering across her face. "Correct." Laura exhaled. 1 question down. 2 more rounds passed. She failed 1 question about a minor noble house's succession laws, earning a strike. But she managed to answer the others through a combination of intuition and half-remembered pack stories. Seraphine, of course, answered everything perfectly. When the trial ended, Laura had 2 strikes. 3 other Omegas had been eliminated, leaving 7 competitors. She'd survived by the thinnest margin. "Adequate," Lady Morven announced. "Dismissed." Laura stood on shaking legs. The bond yanked at her, demanding she go to Cipher, but he was already surrounded by advisors. She forced herself to walk toward the exit instead. She made it halfway across the courtyard before a hand caught her wrist. Cipher pulled her into an alcove, his massive frame blocking her from view. His eyes blazed with that inner fire, and the bond between them roared to life with such intensity that Laura gasped. "You shouldn't," she started. "I know." His voice was rough. "I'm supposed to remain impartial. But watching you in there, seeing you struggle and fight and refuse to give up." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" The bond amplified everything. His touch sent electricity racing through her nerves. Her body swayed toward his, seeking more contact, more heat, more of whatever this impossible connection was. "This isn't fair," Laura whispered. "I can barely think when you're close." "Neither can I." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "The bond demands I claim you fully. Complete what we started. But if I do that before you pass the trials, they'll say I influenced the outcome. That you don't deserve to be queen." "Maybe I don't." His grip tightened. "Don't. You survived today. You'll survive the rest." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made something deep inside her purr with satisfaction. "And I don't choose weakness." Footsteps echoed nearby. Cipher released her immediately, stepping back, his expression shuddering into regal neutrality. But his eyes still burned with barely restrained hunger. "Your Majesty." Seraphine appeared around the corner, her smile venomous. "How convenient to find you both here. I do hope you're not showing favoritism. The other competitors might question the legitimacy of the trials." Cipher's jaw clenched. "Lady Seraphine, was there something you needed?" "Only to remind our king that impartiality is essential." She turned to Laura. "Enjoy your temporary advantage while it lasts." Then she was gone, leaving Laura and Cipher in charged silence. "She's right," Laura said miserably. "You can't keep, we can't." "I know." He turned away. "But stay away from her. Seraphine doesn't just want to win. She wants to destroy you." The royal banquet had been a disaster from the moment Laura picked up the wrong fork. She'd watched the other Omegas navigate the 12-course meal with practiced grace while she fumbled through each elaborate dish, unsure which utensil matched which course. Seraphine had laughed behind her wine glass. Others had whispered loud enough for Laura to hear every cutting word. "She eats like a peasant." Someone should tell her that's a fish knife, not a dessert spoon. The king must be desperate to have marked something so common. When Laura had finally excused herself, Cipher's eyes had tracked her exit with an intensity that made her skin burn, but he hadn't followed. He couldn't. Not without proving Seraphine's accusations of favoritism. The palace gardens sprawled across 3 acres of manicured wilderness. Laura stumbled through archways thick with night-blooming jasmine until she found a secluded corner beside a fountain. She sank onto a stone bench and pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself not to cry. She'd never belonged anywhere. Not in her struggling pack, where Omegas like her were barely tolerated burdens. Not in this glittering court where every gesture, every word, every breath followed rules she'd never learned. The bond had thrust her into a world that would never accept her, and for what? Some cosmic joke? A mistake the universe would eventually correct? "You ran." Laura's head snapped up. Cipher stood at the garden entrance, still dressed in his formal dinner attire, his presence seeming to fill the entire space. "I didn't run," she lied. "I needed air." "You're a terrible liar." He moved closer, moonlight catching the sharp planes of his face. That display in there was calculated cruelty. Seraphine orchestrated it. She didn't need to. Laura's voice cracked. "I am common. I don't know which fork to use or how to curtsy properly or any of the 1,000 things a queen should know. They're right to question this. They question you because they're afraid." Cipher sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel his heat but not quite touching. "You represent something they can't control, proof that power and status mean nothing to fate." "Fate?" Laura laughed bitterly. "You mean blind chance. A fluke. Something that never should have happened." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the fountain's gentle splash. "I had a mate once," Cipher said finally, his voice distant. 200 years ago. Celestine. Beautiful, brilliant, from the most powerful noble house in the realm. The perfect queen. We bonded, ruled together for 30 years. He paused. Then I discovered she'd been working with my enemies. Planning to assassinate me and seize the throne. The bond one thought was sacred turned out to be nothing more than her path to power. Laura's breath caught. What happened to her? "She's dead. I killed her when she tried to poison me at our anniversary feast." His hands clenched. The bond doesn't guarantee loyalty. It doesn't make someone worthy. It just ties you to them. Forever. Or until one of you dies. Then why claim me? The question burst out before Laura could stop it. If you learned not to trust the bond, why mark me at all? Cipher turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her heart stutter. Because when our eyes met at that ceremony, every instinct I've spent 2 centuries building screamed at me that you were different. Real. Mine in a way Celestine never was. His hand lifted, hovering near her face. And that terrifies me more than any enemy I've ever faced. Laura leaned into his touch before she could stop herself. His palm cupped her cheek, and the bond sang between them, electric and overwhelming. I've been invisible my whole life, she whispered. My own pack barely remembered my name. I thought being overlooked was my fate. Then you saw me, and suddenly I exist in a way I never have before. But I don't know if that's the bond or something real. It's real. His thumb traced her lower lip, and Laura's breathing stuttered. Too real. The bond amplifies what's already there, but it doesn't create feelings from nothing. They were close now, so close she could count his heartbeats. His eyes dropped to her mouth, and she felt the exact moment his control began to fracture. The bond pulled them together like gravity, inevitable and irresistible. Laura. Her name on his lips was half prayer, half warning. Please. She didn't even know what she was begging for. He leaned in, and Laura's eyes fluttered closed, her entire body trembling with anticipation. She felt his breath against her lips, felt the heat of him, felt. Cipher jerked back like he'd been burned. No. He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. I can't. Not until you've proven yourself. Not until I know, he stopped, jaw clenched. I won't be the reason you fail the trials. The rejection hit Laura like ice water. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? His voice turned harsh. If we complete the bond now, you'll never know if you earned your place or if I simply claimed you because I couldn't control myself. I don't care about. You should. He was already walking away. Tomorrow's trial tests combat skills. Get some rest. You'll need it. Then he was gone, leaving Laura alone in the gardens with the ghost of an almost kiss and the hollow ache of a bond demanding completion. The second trial had been a humiliation. Combat training Laura had never received, weapons she'd never held, defensive techniques she'd never learned. She'd been eliminated in the first round, earning her third and final strike. Only a technicality in the rules, that 3 strikes meant elimination from individual trials, not the competition itself, had kept her in the running. Seraphine had won naturally, moving with lethal grace that spoke of years of professional instruction. Now Laura sat at another formal banquet, her body aching from bruises, trying to survive yet another test of etiquette she was destined to fail. The wine in her crystal goblet gleamed ruby red in the candlelight. She'd barely touched it, too aware of the watchful eyes tracking her every move. Cipher sat at the head table, his attention supposedly on some ambassador's droning speech. But Laura felt his gaze on her like a physical touch, the bond humming with barely suppressed concern. She lifted the goblet to her lips, needing something to do with her shaking hands. The wine tasted strange. Bitter beneath the sweetness. Laura frowned, about to set it down, when fire exploded through her veins. The goblet shattered on the marble floor. Laura gasped, clutching her throat as her airway constricted. The room spun. Screams erupted around her, but they sounded distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Then Cipher was there. She didn't see him move, but suddenly his arms were around her, his roar of rage shaking the chandeliers. Who did this? His voice carried the full weight of his alpha command, forcing every person in the room to their knees. Who poisoned her? Laura tried to speak, to tell him she couldn't breathe, but darkness crept into her vision. Through the bond she felt his terror, raw and absolute, and beneath it, a fury that promised death. Stay with me. Cipher's hand pressed against her chest, and Laura felt something impossible happen. The burning in her veins began to transfer, flowing through their bond into him. He was taking the poison into himself, using their connection to draw it from her body into his own. No, she managed to gasp. I'll survive. You won't. His eyes blazed gold, his alpha power manifest and terrifying. I'm not losing you. The poison continued its migration. Laura's breathing eased even as Cipher's jaw clenched in pain. But he was stronger, older, his Lykan healing already fighting the toxin she couldn't have survived. Around them, guards had seized several nobles. Someone was screaming denials. Laura didn't care. All she could focus on was Cipher's face above hers, the way he held her like she was the most precious thing in existence, the bond between them blazing so bright it hurt. I've got you, he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. I've got you. The poison's effects faded slowly. When Laura could finally breathe normally again, she realized they were alone in Cipher's private chambers. He sat on the edge of his massive bed, cradling her in his lap, his hand stroking her hair with infinite gentleness. The wine, she whispered. Someone put something in my wine. Wolfsbane extract. Enough to kill an Omega in minutes. His voice was cold fury. They confessed. Lady Morgana, one of Seraphine's closest allies. She claimed she acted alone. Do you believe her? No. Cipher's arms tightened around her. But she'll face execution regardless. I've made it clear what happens to anyone who threatens my mate. Laura pulled back enough to see his face. You nearly died taking that poison. I would have taken all of it if necessary. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Do you understand now? This bond, what you mean to me, it's not politics or duty. When I felt you dying through our connection, I would have burned the entire palace down to save you. Cipher. No more pretending I can remain impartial. No more acting like this is just about the trials. His eyes blazed into hers. You're mine, Laura. And I will destroy anyone who tries to harm you. The possessiveness should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safe for the first time since the blood moon. Someone wants me dead, she said quietly. The trials aren't just about proving I'm worthy. They're about surviving long enough to. Which is why you'll have a personal guard from now on. Cipher's tone left no room for argument. Marcus, my most trusted warrior. He'll shadow you everywhere until we root out everyone involved in this conspiracy. That'll just make the others resent me more. Let them resent you. Let them fear you. His hand slid to her neck, fingers tracing the mating mark that branded her as his. You survived poison tonight. You'll survive whatever else they throw at you. Because you're stronger than you think, and because I won't let anything take you from me. Laura's breath caught at the fierce certainty in his voice. This was the king everyone feared, powerful, ruthless, absolute. And he'd nearly destroyed himself to save her. Stay with me tonight, Cipher said, though it wasn't really a request. I need to feel you breathing. Need to know you're safe. Laura nodded, curling into his chest, letting his heartbeat steady her own. The intimacy trial was designed to test bond compatibility. 7 remaining Omegas stood in the grand hall with their assigned alpha partners, powerful nobles meant to demonstrate chemistry and potential for future mating. Laura stood alone, waiting, until Cipher himself descended from his throne. The room fell silent. Royal law permits the bonded king to participate directly when his chosen mate competes, Lady Morven announced, though her disapproval was evident. The dance of claiming will test the strength of connection between partners. Seraphine's face twisted with barely concealed fury. This was the one trial Laura couldn't fail. The bond between her and Cipher was undeniable, electric, overwhelming. The other Omegas might demonstrate grace and compatibility, but none of them shared a true mating bond. The music began, ancient and primal, drums beating a rhythm that seemed to match Laura's racing heart. Cipher's hand extended toward her, and the moment their fingers touched, the bond roared to life with such intensity that Laura gasped. He pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other cradling her neck where his mark burned. They moved together, and it wasn't rehearsed or practiced, it was instinct. Laura's body knew exactly where to step, how to turn, when to press closer. The bond guided them through movements that grew increasingly intimate. Cipher's eyes blazed gold. His control was fracturing. Laura could feel it through their connection, the leash he'd kept on his desire fraying with every touch. Her own wants spiraled higher, amplified by the bond until she could barely breathe from the intensity. Laura. Her name was a growl as he spun her, pressing her back against his chest. I can't. Then don't. She arched into him, shameless, desperate. Stop fighting this. His hand splayed across her stomach, and heat flooded through her. The dance called for them to separate, to complete the ritual with dignified distance. Instead, Cipher turned her in his arms and claimed her mouth in a kiss that made the entire whole gasp. It wasn't gentle. It was possession and promise and 2 weeks of denied hunger crashing together. Laura's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the bond between them exploded with golden light visible to everyone watching. Cipher broke the kiss only to lift her into his arms. Trial's over, he snarled at the stunned court. His eyes swept the room with alpha dominance that made even the boldest nobles look away. She's mine. Anyone who questions it can face me directly. Then he was carrying her through the halls, moving so fast the walls blurred. Guards scrambled out of their path. Servants fled. Laura buried her face in his neck, breathing in his scent, trembling with need so intense it bordered on pain. His chamber doors slammed open, then closed. Locked. Cipher set her down, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, chests heaving. The bond pulled taut between them, demanding, desperate. Last chance, he said roughly. Tell me to stop, and I will. But once we do this, I'm already yours. Laura reached for the laces of her gown. Make it complete. His control shattered. Cipher closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, his hands replacing hers on the laces, stripping away fabric with barely restrained violence. Laura's dress pooled at her feet, leaving her bare before him, trembling not with fear but anticipation. You're so beautiful, he breathed, his hands skating over her skin with reverence that contradicted the hunger in his eyes. And untouched. Laura, I want this. Want you. She pulled at his shirt, needing to feel skin against skin. Please. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the massive bed. The silk sheets were cool against her back, but Cipher's body above hers burned. His mouth found her neck, kissing the mating mark, and pleasure shot through her so intensely she cried out. I'll be gentle, he promised against her skin. I don't want gentle. I want you. The first joining was pain and pleasure intertwined. Laura's virginity surrendered with a sharp gasp that Cipher swallowed with another searing kiss. He stilled, giving her time to adjust, his entire body shaking with the effort of restraint. Then Laura moved, and restraint became impossible. The bond amplified everything. Every touch, every sensation, every emotion flowing between them until Laura couldn't tell where she ended and Cipher began. The pleasure built impossibly higher, and when release finally crashed through them both, the bond blazed so bright that windows throughout the palace shattered. Laura felt the shockwave ripple outward, their completed mating sending a pulse of power through the entire realm that announced to everyone what had just happened. Cipher collapsed beside her, pulling her into his arms, both of them gasping. Through the bond, Laura felt his awe, his satisfaction, his absolute certainty. Mine, he murmured, pressing kisses to her sweat-dampened skin. Completely mine. Yours, Laura agreed, and finally felt like she belonged somewhere. Laura woke to find herself glowing. Literally glowing, a soft golden light emanated from her skin, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Beside her, Cipher slept peacefully, one arm draped possessively across her waist, and the same golden light shimmered beneath his skin. The completed bond. Laura could feel it now, fully formed and powerful, a living connection that thrummed with shared energy. But there was something else too, a new awareness settling into her consciousness like unlocking a door she hadn't known existed. Omega powers. The ancient abilities that only manifested in truly bonded mates. Laura slipped from the bed carefully, not wanting to wake Cipher. She needed to understand what was happening to her body. The golden light faded as she focused, her control over it instinctive. She could feel the bond stretching between them even across the room, could sense Cipher's contentment in sleep, his alpha nature at peace in a way he rarely allowed while awake. A noise from the corridor outside made Laura freeze. Voices, low and urgent. She moved toward the door, her newly heightened senses picking up every word with crystal clarity. Can't wait much longer. The bond is complete now. It'll be harder to sever. Laura's blood ran cold. She pressed her ear to the door. The blood ritual requires 3 nobles of ancient lineage and the full moon. That voice belonged to someone familiar, though Laura couldn't quite place it. 2 weeks. We strike in 2 weeks, during the next trial. While everyone's distracted, we'll perform the severance spell. Without the bond, she'll be vulnerable. Easy to eliminate. And the king. The severance will weaken him significantly. Losing a completed mate bond, it'll destroy half his power for weeks. Long enough for us to execute the coup. Lady Seraphine won't be pleased we're moving without her approval. A dark chuckle. Seraphine thinks she's leading this conspiracy. Let her believe it. Once Cipher falls and the Omega dies, we'll deal with her delusions of queenship. Footsteps retreated down the corridor. Laura stood frozen, her mind racing. They were planning to sever the bond using blood magic. Planning to kill her. Planning to overthrow Cipher. She had to tell him. Laura turned to find Cipher already awake, sitting up in bed, his eyes sharp and alert. Through the bond, he'd felt her spike of fear. What did you hear? His voice was deadly calm. Laura told him everything, words tumbling out in a rush. With each sentence, Cipher's expression grew darker, more dangerous. By the time she finished, his hands were clenched into fists. Blood magic, he said quietly. They're planning to use blood magic against us. You believe me? I feel your certainty through the bond. You're not lying. He stood, pacing like a caged predator. But my own nobles? Planning a coup. Not Seraphine. Or not just her. Laura wrapped a sheet around herself, moving closer. They said she thinks she's leading the conspiracy, but they're using her. Cipher's jaw clenched. Who were the voices? Could you identify them? One was familiar, but I can't place it. Frustration welled up inside her. If I heard it again. Then we'll make them talk again. Cipher pulled her into his arms, and Laura felt his rage through the bond, cold, calculated, lethal. They want to sever our bond. Destroy what we have. They have no idea what they've awakened. What do? We investigate. Carefully. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Your new abilities. Can you sense emotions? Read people. Laura concentrated, reaching out with that new awareness. She could feel Cipher's emotions clearly, his fury, his protectiveness, his love. I think so. It's stronger with you because of the bond, but I can sense something. Like emotional echoes. Then we'll use that. Cipher's eyes gleamed with strategic calculation. The next trial is in 3 days. We'll attend every social function between now and then. You'll listen, sense, observe. I'll watch for suspicious behavior. Between us, we'll identify the conspirators. They're planning to strike during the next trial, which gives us 2 weeks to dismantle their plot. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. But Laura, if they're willing to use blood magic, they're desperate. Dangerous. You'll need to be careful. We'll need to be careful, she corrected. They want to weaken you too. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, then warmth. You're thinking like a queen. Like a partner. Isn't that what I am now? Yes. He kissed her properly this time, deep and claiming. My mate. My queen. My partner. And together, we're going to destroy everyone who threatens what's ours. Laura felt the truth of it through their bond. They were stronger together than apart. The conspiracy had made a fatal mistake. By completing their bond, by forcing them to unite as true partners, they created something far more powerful than they could have anticipated. The hunters had become the hunted. The border attack came at dawn on the day of the leadership trial. Reports of rogue Lykans massacring an entire village, demanding Cipher's immediate presence. Laura watched him prepare for departure, dread coiling in her stomach. This is too convenient, she said, helping him buckle his armor. The trial starts today, and suddenly there's a crisis that requires you specifically? I know. Cipher's jaw was tight. But if I don't go and people die, the court will use it against you. Say I'm too distracted by our bond to fulfill my duties as king. He cupped her face. The leadership trial requires you to rule in my absence anyway. 3 days. You'll make decisions, handle disputes, manage the court. This just makes it real instead of theoretical. What if I fail? You won't. His certainty flowed through their bond. You're stronger than you believe, Laura. Trust yourself the way I trust you. He kissed her deeply, then pulled away before she could protest further. Marcus stays with you. And I'll feel everything through our bond. If you're in real danger, you'll be too far away to help. Laura forced strength into her voice. Go. Save those people. I'll handle things here. She felt his reluctance through their connection, his alpha instinct screaming at him to stay and protect his mate. But duty won. It always did with Cipher. The moment he left, the vultures circled. Laura sat on the throne, Cipher's throne, feeling like an imposter. Lady Morven stood before her with the day's agenda, land disputes, trade agreements, a noble accused of embezzling crown funds. Decisions that would affect thousands of lives. The accused Lord Brennan demands trial by combat, Lady Morven announced. As acting ruler, you must either grant his request or pass judgment yourself. Laura's new Omega senses picked up the trap immediately. Grant the trial, and she'd look weak, unable to make hard decisions. Pass judgment without it, and they'd accuse her of tyranny. What evidence exists of his guilt? Laura asked. Financial records. Witness testimony from his own steward. Laura reached out with her abilities, sensing the room's emotional currents. Fear from Lord Brennan. Anticipation from several nobles. They expected her to fumble this. Bring me the records and the steward, Laura commanded. I'll review the evidence personally before rendering judgment. Surprise rippled through the court. It was the careful, methodical approach, neither weak nor tyrannical. The next 2 days were brutal. A border dispute required her to choose between 2 noble houses, both politically powerful. A trade agreement with a neighboring realm needed renegotiation when their ambassador tried to exploit her inexperience. Seraphine herself challenged one of Laura's rulings publicly, forcing a tense confrontation where Laura had to assert her authority without Cipher's presence to back her. Through it all, Laura felt Cipher's consciousness at the edge of her awareness. Fighting his own battles, struggling with the distance between them, wanting desperately to return. Their bond stretched taut but held strong. On the 3rd morning, a delegation of rebellious nobles demanded an audience. Lord Castellan, a powerful alpha Laura recognized from court functions, led them. Her Omega senses screamed danger. Lady Laura, he said, deliberately omitting her title. We've come to discuss your temporary authority. Several of us question whether an unmated Omega. I'm bonded to your king, Laura interrupted coldly. The mating mark on my neck and the shockwave that shattered half the palace windows made that abundantly clear. A bond rushed through by lust isn't the same as. Choose your next words carefully, Lord Castellan. Laura stood, channeling every ounce of authority she'd learned from watching Cipher. You're questioning not just my worthiness, but the king's judgment. That borders on treason. Castellan's eyes flashed with anger and something else, calculation. We simply believe certain decisions should wait for the king's return. Laura's senses picked up deception, malice. This was one of them. One of the conspirators. She was certain of it. Which decisions concern you? She asked sweetly. The Lord Brennan matter, for instance. Perhaps his trial by combat should be granted after all. Brennan was part of the conspiracy too. They wanted him freed to continue their plot. Lord Brennan's embezzlement is proven beyond doubt, Laura said firmly. He'll face justice. His lands and titles are forfeit to the crown, effective immediately. You overstep. I rule in my mate's stead with his full authority. Laura descended from the throne, moving closer to Castellan. Her new Omega powers flared, and she saw him flinch. Do you challenge that authority? Because if so, we can settle this when King Cipher returns. I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about your concerns. The threat was clear. Castellan backed down, but the hatred in his eyes promised retribution. That night, alone in Cipher's chambers, Laura finally allowed herself to shake. Through the bond, she felt Cipher's pride, his desire to be with her, his trust. She'd survived 3 days of ruling. Had made hard choices. Had faced down rebellious nobles. And she'd identified at least 2 more conspirators in the process. When Cipher returned at dawn on the 4th day, he found Laura asleep in his throne, wrapped in his cloak, looking every inch the queen she was becoming. The final trial was meant to be a formality. Laura had survived every test, proven her capability to rule, earned grudging respect even from her harshest critics. The ceremony celebrating the completion of the trials would culminate in her official coronation as queen. Laura stood in the grand hall wearing ceremonial robes of deep blue and silver, Cipher at her side. 5 remaining Omega competitors had been eliminated throughout the trials, leaving only Laura and Seraphine. But even Seraphine had been forced to concede. The completed mating bond made Laura's position unassailable. Or so they thought. The attack came during the oath-taking. Laura had just begun reciting the ancient words when pain exploded through her chest. Not physical pain, something worse. The bond itself was being torn apart from the inside. She screamed, collapsing. Cipher caught her, then roared in agony as the same pain ripped through him. Through their fragmenting connection, Laura felt his power draining away, their link unraveling like severed threads. Blood magic. The conspirators were using blood magic right here, right now. The grand hall erupted into chaos. 3 nobles stepped forward from the crowd, their hands glowing with sickly red light. Lord Castellan. Lord Brennan, who should have been in custody. And Marcus. Cipher's voice was raw with betrayal. Laura's personal guard, the warrior Cipher trusted above all others, stood with the conspirators. His face was emotionless as he raised his hands, adding his power to the severance spell. I'm sorry, my king, Marcus said without a trace of remorse. But your time is over. You've grown soft, distracted by a common Omega when you should be leading us to glory. The old ways must return. Cipher tried to stand, to fight, but the bond's destruction was crippling him. Laura felt his strength hemorrhaging through their connection. She had to do something. Had to stop this. Laura reached deep inside herself, finding that wellspring of Omega power that had awakened when she and Cipher completed their bond. It responded to her desperation, flooding her veins with golden light. You think I'm weak? Laura's voice rang with power that made the conspirators stumble. You think I'm just a distraction? She stood, the golden light blazing brighter, and threw herself between Cipher and the blood magic. The severance spell hit her full force, trying to rip through her to reach the bond. Laura screamed but held firm, using her Omega abilities to shield their connection.
Impossible, Castellan snarled.
No Omega has that kind of power. No common Omega, Laura corrected. Her eyes blazed with the same golden light that pulsed through her veins. But I'm his mate. His queen. And you will not touch what's ours. The bond, instead of breaking, began to heal. Laura pulled Cipher's draining strength back through their connection, stabilizing him even as the blood magic battered against her defenses. Cipher surged to his feet, his alpha power returning. His eyes met Laura's, and through their bond, they moved as one. He attacked the conspirators with brutal efficiency, while Laura maintained the shield protecting their connection. Marcus drew his sword, engaging Cipher in combat. They trained together for decades. Marcus knew every move Cipher would make. But he hadn't counted on Laura. She lashed out with her Omega power, golden energy wrapping around Marcus's legs and yanking him off balance. Cipher's blade found his throat in the next heartbeat. Why? Cipher demanded, not striking the killing blow yet. After everything. Because you chose her over duty. Over tradition. Marcus's eyes blazed with fanaticism. The realm needs a strong king, not one weakened by love. Love makes me stronger, Cipher growled. Then his blade flashed, and Marcus fell. Castellan and Brennan tried to flee. Laura wouldn't let them. Her power lashed out, binding them in place with golden chains of pure energy. Cipher's guards, the loyal ones, surrounded them immediately. But the blood magic still burned in the air, and Laura realized with horror that there was a fourth conspirator. Someone still channeling power into the severance spell. Show yourself. Cipher roared. From the shadows behind the throne, a figure emerged. Lady Morven, the head judge who had overseen every trial. Her hands glowed with blood-red light, and her face twisted with hatred. You really thought I'd let some low-born nobody become queen? Morven's voice dripped venom. I've served this court for 200 years. I was there when Celestine tried to kill you, Cipher. I helped you execute her. And I've been planning this ever since, waiting for you to be foolish enough to bond again. You helped me, Cipher said slowly, realization dawning. You encouraged me to present Laura to the court. To hold the trials. Because I knew she'd fail. Knew the court would tear her apart. Morven's spell intensified. But you completed the bond too quickly. Gave her power before I could eliminate her. So I adapted. Used your own love against you. Laura felt the severance magic building to a crescendo. Morven was pouring everything into one final attack, not just to break the bond, but to kill them both. Together, Laura said through their connection. Together, Cipher agreed. They released their combined power as one, alpha dominance and Omega protection, strength and wisdom, fury and love merged into something unprecedented. The golden-red collision lit up the entire palace, visible for miles. When the light faded, Morven lay unconscious, her blood magic shattered. The remaining conspirators were captured. And Laura and Cipher stood unbroken, their bond blazing stronger than ever. It's over, Cipher said, pulling Laura into his arms. Through their connection, she felt his exhaustion, his relief, his overwhelming love.
No, Laura corrected softly.
It's just beginning. Please, I need a favor from you. Help me reach 1,500 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. Thank you. Let's continue. 3 days after the battle, Laura stood before a mirror in the royal dressing chambers, barely recognizing herself. The coronation gown was a masterpiece of silver silk and midnight blue crystals, designed to catch the light with every movement. Her hair had been woven with pearls and moonstones. The mating mark on her neck was displayed proudly rather than hidden. She looked like a queen. More importantly, she felt like one. Having second thoughts? Cipher appeared behind her, magnificent in his formal regalia. Through their bond, she felt his nervousness beneath the confident exterior. About becoming queen? No. Laura turned to face him. About whether I deserve this. Also no. I've earned it. Pride and love flooded through their connection. Cipher pulled her close, careful not to crush her elaborate gown. You have. You saved us both, destroyed a conspiracy, ruled in my absence, and proved to everyone that you're exactly where you belong. I couldn't have done it without you. We're stronger together. He pressed his forehead to hers, and Laura felt something shift in their bond, a barrier falling away, walls crumbling. Laura, I need to tell you something before we walk out there. What is it? I love you. The words came out rough, uncertain, like he wasn't used to saying them. Not because of the bond or fate or destiny. I love you, the woman who slapped a king, who refused to give up even when everyone expected you to fail, who stood between me and blood magic because you're too stubborn to let anything hurt what's yours. He cupped her face. If the bond disappeared tomorrow, I would still choose you. Every time. Forever. Tears pricked Laura's eyes. Through their connection, she felt the absolute truth of his words, the depth of emotion he'd kept locked away out of fear. I love you too, she whispered. The grumpy king who pretends to be heartless but takes poison into himself to save his mate. Who trusts me to rule even when he's terrified. Who chose me when the entire world said I wasn't enough. She kissed him softly. You were always enough, Cipher. And together, we're unstoppable. The coronation hall was packed. Every noble, every dignitary, every citizen who could fit into the massive space had come to witness this moment. Laura felt the weight of their stares as she and Cipher walked down the aisle hand in hand, their bond glowing visibly with golden light. Seraphine stood among the crowd, her expression neutral. She'd survived the trials with her dignity intact, and in a private conversation the day before, had grudgingly admitted that Laura had proven herself worthy. It wasn't friendship, but it was respect. Cipher led Laura to the throne and turned to face the assembled crowd. His voice rang with alpha authority. 3 weeks ago, the blood moon chose. Today I choose. Not because fate demands it, but because I have found my equal, my partner, my queen. He lifted the crown, delicate silver worked into the shape of intertwined wolves. Laura, you came into my life when I had given up on love, on trust, on the possibility of a true mate. You fought for your place here with courage and strength. You protected our bond when I was too weak to do it myself. You proved that worthiness has nothing to do with bloodlines and everything to do with the heart. Laura knelt, and Cipher placed the crown on her head. The moment it settled, their bond blazed so bright that the entire hall gasped. The golden light spread outward, touching every person present, and Laura felt it, the acceptance, the acknowledgement, the realm itself recognizing her as queen. Rise, Queen Laura, Cipher said, extending his hand. My mate, my love, my equal. Laura stood, taking his hand, and the hall erupted in cheers. That night, alone in their chambers, Laura stood at the window watching the celebrations below. Cipher wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they swayed together in comfortable silence. Do you ever regret it? Laura asked quietly. The bond choosing me instead of someone who fit this world? Never. Cipher turned her in his arms. You didn't fit this world, so you changed it. Made it better. Made me better. He kissed her, deep and claiming. We're going to rule together for centuries, Laura. And every day, I'm going to choose you all over again. Every day, Laura agreed, her bond glowing with contentment and love and absolute certainty. They had started as strangers bound by fate. They had become partners forged in battle. And now they were something even more powerful, two souls who had chosen each other, over and over, until the bond between them was unbreakable. The Lykan King and his Omega Queen stood together, their combined light illuminating the darkness, ready to face whatever the future held. Side by side. Equal. Eternal.